Jesus and the Canaanite woman. This is a tough lesson to hear. Jesus turns down the mother flat when she pleads with him for healing for her daughter. How do we wrestle with this image of Jesus? This is not the same image we have of Jesus, who opens his arms wide and says, "Let the children come to me." This Jesus has an edge. We could just go straight to Paul for an explanation. In Romans, he says that we are all descendants of Abraham. God does not reject his people. That is comforting. We are like the Canaanite woman. In the end, we will receive the healing of God. We are brought into the chosen to whom Jesus has sent to save. That is good news for us to hear from Paul. But in this case, it lets Jesus off the hook too easily. We need to pay attention to that edge in Jesus, even if it makes us uncomfortable. The Gospel of Matthew begins, an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It is clear from this moment that the narrative begins that Jesus is the anointed one, the one who will bring in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is the one, God with us. God's vision will finally come to pass. But we know it is not that easy. Our humanness gets in the way. I recently read the book Made for Goodness by the former Archbishop of Cape Town, South Africa, Desmond Tutu, and his daughter Mpho Tutu. He tells a story about growing up in segregated South Africa that stood out to me. I remember as a young boy being sent into town on a weekday. Classes had already started, but my father wanted something or other from the store. I went past the white children's school and saw the black children from our township scavenging in the dustbins. The government had a school-based food program for the white children, but those children would throw that bread and fruit in the trash because they preferred the food their mommies had sent with them. There was no meal program for the black children. Their mommies often couldn't afford to buy them bread or fruit or anything else to eat. There had been a government food program for the black children too, but when the Nationalist Party, the architects of apartheid, came into power, they abolished the program. We can't provide for all the black children, Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd explained, so we won't provide for any of them. What immediately jumped out at me as I was reading this is the connection this story has to the gospel for today. The black children hoping for leftovers, some crumbs from the white children's lunches. The inequality of it all, the injustice. This was my first reaction. But the part of the story that has stayed with me and challenges me is the attitude of the people in power. We can hear the wrongness of that statement. If we can't provide for all the black children, we won't provide for any of them. Why not try to make a dent in the problem? Why not try to feed as many as you can? But we are asking the wrong questions. The hardest part of that is not feeding all the children. The hardest part is breaking through the dividing lines and changing people's hearts toward compassion. It is so easy to put up dividing lines. They are clear, and we know which side we are on, especially if we are the one drawing the line. Isn't that why Jesus was born in human flesh, God with us, to break through those lines that divide us and bring compassion? To break through our human sinfulness and bring in the kingdom of heaven? And yet, here we have Jesus standing firmly on one side of the line. And then I think about myself. How many times have I decided to make my stand? I tell myself I am in the right. Why should I be the first one to make the first move, to give an inch, to let them win? My line in the sand is there for good reason. I have already forgiven her one too many times. If I give in on that project at work, he will see me as weak. I am exhausted. Whoever asks for help next is getting no for an answer. Our reasons are strong, but when do our self-made rules stand in the way and undermine our relationships? I am challenged by this story not only in my own behavior, but for how we are together. What happens when they stop being them and become a hungry, tired guest at pads, weary of the constant moving from site to site? Or a refugee father leaving all security and possessions behind, committing his family to a better life. Or someone from the other red or blue party who is also driven by a commitment to work for a stronger, more vital country. Or a desperate mother looking for help and healing, even from someone she knows will refuse her. The way we can break through the dividing lines is to meet each other face to face, to hear each other and our pleas for compassion. Maybe that is what caused the change in Jesus. His first response was reciting policy. I came for the lost sheep of Israel. He was stating his official mission. He was firmly standing in the right. He knew his official role as the son of David, the promised one for the people of God. And here is this outsider boldly asking for help. And Jesus sees her as a faceless part of the other. This isn't the Jesus we want to feel good about. Turning away from the needs of others, not responding to someone in pain. But this is the Jesus who shows us what it looks like when we step over those lines that divide us and risk proximity. Risk seeing the person created by God standing right in front of us. Jesus shows us that change in ourselves is possible. And I do not mean to say that Jesus' behavior was a calculated teaching moment. It was not designed for the disciples and for us. I think Jesus' change of heart is authentic, which makes it even more powerful. The kingdom of heaven breaking through this world bit by bit, person by person, relationship by relationship. Their story becomes our story, and we see ourselves in them. And more importantly, Jesus works through that moment, that seeing, and we have a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven. We see how together we live into that mystery of sacred community that begins at the communion table and takes us out into the world. We need what Desmond Tutu calls the disciplined art of love. True loving requires attention, forgiveness, empathy, compassion. Breaking out of our own comfort zone, surrounded by our clear lines, and moving toward a way that is embraced by grace. It is grace that makes Jesus look beyond his job description and see right in front of him. Grace reminds him who he is, the anointed one, the one who breaks in to shatter the ways of this world and make something new. And it is that same grace that reminds us who we are, breaking into our lives, transforming us, and making us new with the healing love of Christ. Amen.